Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Pettigen, and I'll be your moderator for today's conversation. I'd like to welcome you to our webcast, Automating Supply Chain Management. The supply chain is the foundation of most organizations' business operations. However, the lack of mission-capable equipment and visibility in the supply chain has left logisticians without efficient capacity to meet demand, which then negatively affects mission readiness and overall performance. Today, most agency leaders are aiming to shift from a disconnected legacy system to a holistic, fully integrated enterprise. But how can you build flexibility and transparency in the supply chain without disrupting that entire process? So for today's conversation, I'm excited to welcome some speakers with me who will join in on that discussion. So first, we have the director of the Supply Chain Management Center at the Marine Corps Logistics Command, Dr. Wanda Soignier, and Pega's Senior Director and Industry Principal for Defense, Cindy Stubner. Throughout today's discussion, we're going to chat about how to advance your supply chain with uninterrupted speed and agility. We'll also dive into the benefits of emerging technology, namely reducing manual effort while increasing productivity, efficiency, and accuracy. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to cover. First, thank you so much to Pega for sponsoring today's important conversation. We couldn't host events like these without their support, so thank you so much for helping us put today's program on. Also, we encourage you to check out our event resource center that's located in the right side of your screen. You can locate some resources there, so feel free to check out during today's conversation or after. And throughout today's event, please share any questions or comments you have via our interactive Q&A. We hope you'll contribute to the conversation about how to tackle some of the government's most complicated problems. With that, I'd love to go ahead and get started. So I'd love to have each of our panelists provide a brief introduction of themselves as well as an overview of their current role and organization. Cindy, why don't we get started with you?
Sure, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm an industry principal at Pega Systems, and I focus on identifying ways Pega can help defense customers improve their business and mission operations with our low-code intelligent automation platform. One of the most significant improvements I've seen in my time at Pega has been when organizations use our platform to insert and enable automation within and across the supply chain. Supply chain is at the core of readiness for the Department of Defense. Getting the right equipment and the people to where they're needed when they're needed is fundamental to the mission, and technology is integral to driving efficiency throughout the enterprise. We've been helping customers across many industries apply technology to enhance and improve their supply chain processes for many years now, to enable better information sharing and to make efficiency gains. So I look forward to the discussion to hear from government experts about other ways we can help. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Wanda, do you mind doing a brief introduction of yourself and your organization?
Yes, good afternoon. As stated, I'm Wanda Soignier. I am the director for the Supply Chain Management Center located at the Marine Corps Logistics Command, Albany, Georgia. I've been the director since 2016, and I've seen some tremendous efforts with the Marine Corps as it relates to becoming a supply chain integrator at the enterprise level to support and meet the mission of our warfighters in the field. Just recently, the Marine Corps undertook a transformation of our supply chain efforts here at LawCom. I'm excited to share with you some of the things that we're doing as it relates to transforming the supply chain to be more of an integrator for end-to-end supply chain solutions. And I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, and so glad to have both of you joining me today. So I know many organizations and agencies are currently in the midst of transforming their supply chain operations. So to kick off this conversation, I'd love to talk a little bit with Wanda about your organization's approach to supply chain management. What type of mission objectives are you all looking at and trying to address first?
That's a very good question. Here at LawCom, we are very diverse in our supply chain management. We mainly focus on the principal end items at this level, as well as what we consider our secondary reparable supply chain, Class 9 supply chain, which is our consumable management that really gets down at the tactical level. However, the center that I engage with and support is looking for solutions to integrate those processes across the Marine Corps enterprise. Prior to the supply chain management transformation strategy, there was not anyone integrating the end-to-end supply chain solutions. We did not have a strong, robust supply chain management that oversaw those efforts, nor did we have the IT solution to support the vision that we had going forward. So we actually built a strategy that says in order to be the Marine Corps enterprise supply chain integrated, we need people, processes, and technology, none of which were strong at the time, but we built a plan and initiative to really build that brand for the Marine Corps. Over.
Thank you. And Cindy, from your private sector perspective, are there certain objectives that you recommend prioritizing across agencies, or any other mission critical needs that you think agencies should really look to address up front? I think you're on mute.
So sorry. What we see with our clients, both commercial and government, is that they're focused very much on the supply chain as an enabler of responsiveness. Obviously, pulling resources through the supply chain, getting items from point A to point B, in the time frame expected and in the volume expected is critical. So responsiveness is a key element of measure that many of our customers look at as a way to focus on driving improvements throughout the supply chain. The other piece of that, I would say, to add to what Wanda said, was that improving the responsiveness also leads you to an improved operational efficiency level. So knowing where everything is within and across the supply chain is critical. And we've seen, especially as citizens of the United States after COVID hit, we've seen how a small disruption in supply chain or one element within that supply chain has a ripple effect across and all the way through. So understanding where those potential pain points are, and then being able to address them up front or ahead of potential risks, getting to a predictive availability actually helps you to improve operational efficiency overall, because you tend to mitigate the impacts of those breaks in the supply chain, or possibly eliminate those impacts and keep the supply chain running in as efficient and effective manner as possible. So really focusing on responsiveness and operational efficiency are key things that we've seen our customers all across the board speak to in terms of what they're looking for from improved technology.
And I would like to, if I could, I would like to interject, because I think that was a very good point. The responsiveness of the supply chain depends on the requirement. It also depends on how the supply chain is able to assume risk, what risk the customer and the supplier are willing to accept. Speaking from experience, when we underwent COVID, trying to move things through the supply chain was very, very challenging, as it is currently, trying to get things moved with the items that are stacking up at the ports, et cetera, et cetera. The responsiveness and having a risk assessment done prior to the disruption, I believe, is key. And we face some of that here when you're dealing with getting items out and getting them through the supply chain over.
Yeah, and I think that's something that agencies deal with across the board in the public sector, as well as organizations outside of government. But and COVID sure has shed to light a lot of some of the problems that might come up across the board, rather than just in specific impacts that you're seeing. But to follow up on that, what are some of the necessary first steps that agency leaders or agencies in general need to meet those mission objectives? I don't know, Cindy, do you have any recommendations for those first steps that agencies should take?
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's very important, and I think anyone across operating within a mission focus would understand having situational awareness of your circumstances at any point in time is important. And that includes when you're starting out to look at how to improve operational efficiency or how to improve processes through technology insertion. So you want to understand what is the as is, and then focus on where you want that to be. And so if you're familiar with the design thinking approach to automating processes or improving business processes, it's really about trying to identify where you are and where you want to go, and how you want to measure that success once you achieve that, what you want the to be to look like. And so understanding what's going on today in your supply chain, where are the areas that things are most effective according to how you evaluate your success metrics, and then where do you want to make changes to improve that circumstance, as well as understanding what are the circumstances you wish to improve and how you measure those, right? Because obviously, automating a bad process doesn't help you achieve an end result of improvement. It just helps you automate something that really probably isn't effective to begin with. But identifying how you want things to look in the future and taking the automation to drive you through to that is really important. So understanding the as is as well as the to be is really the fundamental start of getting you to a point where you're interjecting technology and automation where it needs to be most effective and can move you as far along on the process as you'd like it to.
That makes a lot of sense. And Wanda, I'm curious, are there integral first steps that you've seen when trying to meet those mission objectives?
Absolutely. What we've seen is just what was stated by the previous speaker. You've got to have a mission focus. You've got to have an intent. What's the end state? You're going to have to look backwards a little bit and understand what's preventing you to get to the next level. If you're looking at the as is, what does that to be really look like? You must be able to get to the end state. However, in order to do that, people, process, and technology, our biggest challenge here at the Marine Corps Logistics Command has been the technology leg of that. And we've put things in place now to help us with that. But the technology and understanding what those processes are or what they need to be is critical to the supply chain management transformation strategy. And you must be able to say, what does success look like? What are we willing to measure? What metrics? How do we want our customers and suppliers to be a part of this transformation strategy? So it has to be, the mission has to be the focus. What's the end state, and how do you measure success? Over.
That makes total sense. So Wanda, I'm curious if there is any support that you've seen that is available to agencies as they look to transform their supply chain from your organization's perspective. Has there been any specific support that you'd call out?
Absolutely. So we did several things. Two main points I'll make. One is we did a lot of benchmarking with the other DoD entities, i.e. Army. We visited the Army. We visited the Naval Supply Systems Command. We visited other entities to see how are you tackling the supply chain challenges going forward. What are you doing? We hired a consulting company. We've done, several BCAs, but there have actually been 3 BCAs, business case analysis, totally focused on helping me transform the supply chain management center and to be in that integrator that I mentioned earlier. So I think you're going to have to kind of stretch outside of your comfort zone as private sectors as well as DoD agencies and look for help. Don't be afraid to say, what, I want to take this next step, but I need another set of eyes to come in and help me look at the business case analysis. Here's the intent, write the problem statement, and move out. And like I said, we've done several of those, and I'm pleased to announce that they've all worked. We've implemented a lot of the recommendations. We're still working on a couple things that we need to do, but transforming a supply chain, a business to be a supply chain integrator, as you can imagine, for the Marine Corps is a huge undertaking. Over.
Yeah, and it sounds like collaboration is key in just, working with others who are dealing with similar issues. So that actually is a great tee up for Cindy. What kind of support does companies like Pega provide when looking at supply chain management?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Pega provides a number of different options for looking at how to leverage technology to improve the supply chain overall. One of the best things that we do at Pega is we offer people a Catalyst, called the Catalyst program, and it's really a workshop of sorts that follows along the lines of what I described earlier from a design thinking standpoint, leveraging our technology specifically, because our platform is built with the concept of trying to visually identify and build out how you want your processes to look at and what you want that end result to be. And so through that Catalyst workshop, which really dives in and does a little bit of what Wanda was describing in terms of understanding what you want that end point to be, but also what are the key elements of those processes that must and should be considered when identifying that to be state and where you fit in that entire supply chain. That Catalyst workshop can help identify exactly what types of processes, what types of data, what types of items that are necessary within that supply chain to leverage and focus on in order to achieve that end result, as well as help you identify and articulate the actual metrics involved in measuring that end result and measuring the progress along the way. And then it also helps you outline an actual program approach to implementing that entire automation process from beginning to end. So it helps you really build out the idea of here's how we want to go forward, have the plan so that you can actually execute. So not only do you have the ideas, the concept, and the vision, you have the plan for execution to help you achieve the end result, which is really important. And one thing I did want to mention, though, as Wanda was speaking about the Marine Corps focusing on becoming the supply chain integrator, one of the things that I think is really valuable is that once we realize just how vast and extensive the entire supply chain across the Department of Defense is, and how the different services, the different components, the different commands all fit into that, taking the integrator approach, I think, is really valuable in terms of understanding that you are part of the overall environment and the overall enterprise, and that enterprise is so vast. But I'm curious how she sees in the Marine Corps the integrator role versus what I might consider to be a customer role of I'm a customer of the supply chain, I'm a receiver of equipment, or I'm a receiver of data, how you fit into that supply chain overall, and what the position as an integrator is that might be different or might be the same as what we could consider ultimately the old, traditional supply chain of I order something and I receive it. And I wonder if she could elaborate a little bit on that, how that fits in with the overall vision of being part of the supply chain integration.
So that's a very good point you make. And part of what we're trying to do as we build that integrator process is that we're still looking at the customer and supplier relationship concept. You're like you say, the customer's going to order a part, and someone's going to have to make sure that that part is moving through the supply chain. So what we've done is we've reached out to some of our DoD allies, and we said, hey, look, we're revamping and we're changing how we do business as the Marine Corps supply chain integrator. But we need to bring the supplier relationship management concept back into our business so that the customer and the supplier both have a seat at the table as we transform into being that integrator. Because you want to give them a voice, you want to understand how you want to paint the picture, rather, of how this is going to affect the customer, as well as the supplier who's going to have to help you sustain that supply chain. So we're basically going back to managing the supplier and not the supply, if that makes sense. Over.
That totally makes sense. And it is interesting that you mentioned it in the way that you did and describe it, because what I see happening with a lot of supply chains across the globe is that there's much more of an integration and much more of a, I'll say, collaboration, for lack of a better description, between all of the elements within that supply chain. So like you say, managing the supplier as opposed to the supply really leads to becoming better at being able to ultimately take what you see and improve the visibility across the supply chain, and therefore the predictability of it, and thus the efficiency. So that's fascinating. I'm glad you guys are already so far ahead of the curve on that.
It's been a work in progress since 2018, so we're finally really getting some of the concepts of operation ironed out. But I can tell you it is definitely a process. We wrote the transformation strategy back in 2018. And it has, I think I'm on a draft version now that we're still trying to make sure that everyone understands what we are trying to do. And it's important that our customer and the supplier has a voice in that. The good part about that is where we are located here at the Marine Corps Logistics Command, we've gotten a buy-in and the advocacy at the top level, at the 2-star, 3-star level. Everyone understands that this was a key missing component for the Marine Corps to operate without a supply chain integrator at any level. So we're excited about it, but it comes with a lot of challenges, but we're up for it. Over.
Thank you both. So Wanda, you mentioned working with partners such as a consulting agency and other private sector partners. What type of information does your organization typically share with these partners when you're working through your IT supply chain?
So I'm going to try to stay in my lane. So I'm at my level, for the IT solutions, I have to reach upwards to our headquarters. So I have not been privy to any of the IT solutions that have been developed other than the one that we currently use that directly affects the business that I'm in. But what I can speak to is that when we are looking to bring our partners in, we clearly have to define the task that we want to be worked. We clearly have to understand what it is that the end state of what we're trying to accomplish. And again, all stakeholders must be present. You don't hold the meeting without having everyone at the table and the folks that can make the decisions. But as it relates to the IT supply piece of it, we just got the technology. It's called Navy Enterprise Resource Program. I don't know if there's anyone on the line from NAVSUB, but as Marine Corps, we are now in the Navy's APSR, that really automated program system that really helps us do our day-to-day business as it relates to inventory management. But as far as an IT supply chain, specific to your question, that's done at the upper echelon at the Marine Corps headquarters. Over.
Got it. That makes sense. And Cindy, from the private sector side, just curious if there's specific information that is typically useful for you when looking to support an agency or organization supply chain, IT supply chain.
Sure. Yeah. I'd say aside from understanding a little bit, and Wanda alluded to this, a little bit about the where you want to go and what specific task you're looking at trying to accomplish. Obviously clarity is everything. I do think that agencies, the more that they can open up and get everyone with all the stakeholders in the organization clearly on the same page in terms of what that as is, as well as what the to be should be. I think that's kind of critical because, again, those are the foundation points of mapping out how you move forward and insert automation that will help you advance your success and advance your mission. So I think making sure that all the stakeholders are available, all the stakeholders have input, and everybody is more or less on the same page. And what you could argue that sounds somewhat simple, but I think we're all aware in large organizations, it's much more complicated to make sure that everyone is actually saying the same thing and meaning the same thing that they say when they're talking through what that situational awareness is. So I think that's critical. The other piece of it that I think is very important is the level and depth of the data that you're leveraging when you're trying to make those decisions about what the processes need to be in order to improve efficiency and improve transparency throughout the entire supply chain. So we are awash in data. We are not necessarily awash in intelligence because a lot of that data has quality issues with it, as well as sourcing issues, and as well as residency and who owns what, right? So making sure that the data that you're going to use to enable some of those process mapping and the process enablement is actually the data that will be necessary and what you anticipate using in the future, I think is very critical too, because these are complex problems. And I think everybody can probably imagine, and I'm sure our audience is familiar with, the Department of Defense's supply chain environment and enterprise is the largest in the world, actually. It's so incredibly vast. It's hard to comprehend in real terms. So that is a wash in data, obviously, and a wash in processes, but really getting down to understanding the key nuts and bolts of what you're trying to accomplish is really focused on looking at those items and those changes one journey at a time. And so being very specific, leveraging the clarity of the data that you have and also the clarity of the intention is really what I think is most successful when we see projects like this actually achieve the intended result, is when you have those three elements.
That makes sense. So Wanda, what types of emerging tech are you considering to improve and streamline the efficiency of the supply chain operations within the Marine Corps and Logistics Command? So
we've done several different innovative automations to the current inventory management system here at LawCom. We are also involved in a lot of process mapping, working with business case companies to make sure that we are innovative in those ways that we are currently doing business, i.e. we should not be doing any manual touching and counting. We should be looking for IT solutions that allow us to scan, chip, microchips, all of those innovations that come into the supply chain. So we're really excited because we finally got a system that really could help us do some of that business rather rapidly, and we don't have to go out. We didn't have to go out and buy a lot of it. We just, went in and we were mandated to get the Navy system. So we're looking at those types of solutions that we need to really do our business. And we have stood up an innovation division or center, if you would, that really looks at the business holistically and say, hey, this particular section is using this device. Can you benefit from using the same device rather than, limiting your resources to just trying to do something different when we're all trying to achieve the same end state. So we're really trying to be forward-looking, forward-thinking, not living in the past, because our business is sustaining and being the integrator for the supply chain. So we really have to be innovative and come up to the 21st century, get the right people, get the right skill set, map the processes, know what the requirement is, and then work to get those IT solutions across the enterprise to support the business. Over.
Thank you. Cindy, are there any use cases or examples of emerging tech that you've seen in agencies, or anything you'd like to highlight from your perspective?
Sure. Yes. Actually, we've got a lot of experience on the commercial side, and this is also true with certain governments as well, with regard to certain technology insertion that focuses really a lot around the entire transparency throughout the supply chain process. So key element of that meaning data management, right? Understanding where items are, having the visibility to know where those items are across, and have a level of accuracy within that environment lead you to get to what we would call the predictive supply chain, which is the ultimate goal. That involves a level of data analysis and analytics, but it also involves core situational awareness to understand what the supply chain represents when you're doing that analysis, and what the risks are within that supply chain of any kind of failures or interruptions or disruptions, however you want to describe it. So use cases that we've seen specifically around support and understanding around data management, or what in some of our customers call master data management, is really across looking at trying to integrate a number of different what we call enterprise resource planning, or ERP systems, that are located across the globe. So they're not centrally located. So they're disparate systems. They also operate in disparate and functional areas. And so taking an integration capability or a technology or a platform such as what Pega System provides helps to bridge that gap and play a little bit like what Wanda mentioned earlier in terms of the supply chain integrator role, really pulling together a series of different environments into one central repository, for lack of a better description, that actually provides a level of visibility and transparency across the enterprise in a data management approach. So always making sure that what you're looking at and what you're pulling into that environment is actually quality data that provides the right level of visibility about the specific elements within the supply chain that you are trying to identify and query on at that very time. The other thing that this kind of a use case provides is an exceptional level of capability around risk management, because, as we mentioned, there are all kinds of risks to a supply chain. One of the most critical ones that we see these days, especially given how automated and how integrated supply chains can be, is the risk around interruption from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so having that, having a visibility across the supply chain for technology not only provides you visibility into where things are, but also visibility into the risks that can be posed to you as part of the cybersecurity risks, or hacking, or however you want to call it. And then one of the best examples of that is a recent issue with the pipeline that we saw, where pipeline was taken down because of a hacking incident. Understanding where that hacking incident was and really having visibility across that entire chain enabled the organization to access that very quickly and resolve it very quickly, right? So that's another layer that is added to the challenges of supply chain across the Department of Defense, especially given how much of a target DoD is for, I'll say IT-related incidents, and we'll just call it that. So use cases that provide a level of integration across the supply chain for data management specifically, but also for integration across elements of the supply chain, I think is a really good and very applicable use case to what Wanda's describing is going on within the Marine Corps.
Thank you. So we touched a little bit on these emerging technologies and how they're being implemented. But Wanda, I'm curious if you have any best practices around how you've seen the integration of some of these new technologies into your existing systems.
Yes, we've seen some best practices. And, again, we did some of the benchmarking earlier when we started into this transformation. And what we did see was exactly what was just spoken. You've got to be able to understand what it is the customer is after. You have to be able to understand the end-to-end supply chain monster, because these things that we're facing, did not just happen overnight. We're constantly looking at the supply chain, trying to revamp or to revitalize bottlenecks or to understand the transportation leg or the inventory piece of that. So I think some of the best practices that we've implemented that we saw from other services, one specifically with the Navy, was to be integrated into the enterprise resource planning suite that they currently use to do the majority of their business as a single IT solution that the Navy is using for that business function. And we've adapted that at the Marine Corps level. Over.
Thank you. And what are some of the biggest challenges or risks that organizations face when incorporating new technologies into supply chain operations? Cindy, do you have any challenges or risks that you've seen from the private sector side?
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned a little earlier, obviously the issues around cybersecurity and hacking, making sure that your supply chain is secure from an IT standpoint, in addition to an overall operational standpoint, is very critical. Obviously, we see and hear about issues with the supply chain in terms of IT infrastructure and hacking or breaking into a system. So that is obviously very critical from a risk standpoint, because the more that you leave yourself open to those types of attacks, the more you leave yourself open to those types of risks, the less value your data will have ultimately, but also the less ability you have to achieve the ultimate goal of your supply chain, which is the visibility and providing the right information and the right capabilities, tools, equipment, whatever it may be, to people that when they need them at the right time. So that is very critical. We also see where there can be an awful lot of, misunderstanding or miscategorization of items and data within the system that provides a level of reliability and consistency across the supply chain. If the technology that you're leveraging does not have the right access or the right visibility into the core elements of the supply chain, especially around the globe. And so, again, a lot of this boils down to some simple, basic, fundamental principles of once you're mapping out that supply chain, that you understand, the as is and the to be, but also that you understand the ultimate goals of what you're trying to accomplish with that supply chain, and really managing all of the stakeholders and the key elements of that supply chain. So when Wanda was describing managing suppliers, not the supply, I think, as supply chains evolve, and we're seeing this with a number of our customers, as those supply chains become more sophisticated, not necessarily more complicated, because those are really two different things, but as they become more sophisticated, what we're noticing is that there becomes more of that collaboration and integration across the elements of the supply chain. And it does really get to a point where you're looking at the sharing of information as a way to elevate your supply chain, as opposed to keeping that information or protecting that information at a level that doesn't provide you the visibility and transparency, and therefore eliminates the predictability that you're trying to achieve. And so I think, we have to find the right balance there, because there's always risk involved. Every time you open up an element of your system to more invitation, you obviously add more potential risk that could be used for the wrong purposes or the wrong goals. But I think as we extend and expand using capabilities and agile methodologies such as DevSecOps, we're building the security into those systems as we grow them. The collaboration can become easier as long as everybody's on the same page about what that really represents. So I think that we've got capability, and we've got the potential to advance those to a level that we already often have the vision for. I also think that with regard to one of the key elements that Wanda mentioned before, the people and the people element within a supply chain are also very critical. So, a lot of the supply chain principles that original ERP supply chain systems are built upon have been evolving over time, but the systems haven't necessarily been evolving the same way that the people have thought about them differently. But more importantly, some of our folks still are operating with those old paradigms in mind. So I am kind of curious. I mean, we've seen this with some of our customers that really want to push the envelope, I'll say, to advance the supply chains and force their employees and the people and stakeholders to think differently. I wonder how that's working throughout the Marine Corps as the organization evolves to be that supply chain integrator. What elements of people management or people progress are being made in order to help achieve that result as well?
So you were looking at my paper, because that's exactly where I'm going.
I'm sorry, I'm guilty.
You said a lot, but you basically said exactly what we're thinking here. We came into a new ERP system, and unfortunately, with the spirit of transparency, we did not have the skill set to operate fully in the system, and that is still a struggle for us today. But we did some forward thinking as the system came online. We were able to bring in, first we had to get some contractor support to help us work some of those glitches out in the system. We have to reevaluate the nature of our business. What I mean by that is that I needed folks to operate in this particular environment who are tech savvy, who understand the supply chain end to end, who have the technical nuances to navigate through the challenges of an ERP system. We basically had to do hiring actions that had to catch up to the process. We did not have that skill set to operate in the system. We needed system analysts, and we were using inventory managers. So we really had to, we prepped the battle space per se, meaning we were getting ready, but it was a challenge to find the skill set. Still today, we don't have them all. We're missing about 15 or so. But we need the proper skill set. So we're matching the skill set to the hiring action to make sure that we can get the right people in here. Now, all of this was pre-told to us when we were doing the BCA. We knew going in that we did not have a full skill set of folks to get this done because there were so many different roles and responsibilities. So we had to weigh the risk of going live in the system and burning out other, 5 or 6 people to get this done. But we were able to maneuver through the battlefield and get the right skill set today, missing about 15 because this is a total new area for us. We've always operated into a manual, I repeat, a manual system that was doing our heavy lifting for the supply chain for the Marine Corps as it relates to those specific commodities that I spoke to earlier. But we're getting over that hurdle. The other comment that I would make, too, is the data quality that you mentioned. You have to assume the risk or the reward. Which one do you weigh first? Everyone wants to get in a system that went live and start doing things immediately. That does not happen. There's always new roles and responsibilities, the concerns for cybersecurity, data quality, et cetera. But the skill set, the people piece was really, really important to us because we knew we had a new technology. We knew we needed a new skill set and able to operate in that environment.
Thank you. And Cindy, you asked one of my next questions, so thanks for just preemptively doing that. That's great. I think that conversation around the skill sets and personnel is so important across government and defense. So actually, to hop back a little bit, I know Cindy brought up the pipeline example, and I'm curious, Wanda, from your side. So the SolarWinds and the Colonial Pipeline hacks have put a spotlight on critical vulnerabilities in IT supply chains. How has this impacted how your agency is managing third-party risk?
So I'll go back to my original comment. Now, again, I don't see those risks at the level that I'm at because of my position, and I don't have that viewpoint. But in speaking to my colleagues here at LawCom, those are the type of risk and assessments that are done at the higher echelon headquarters and how they manage that and how they bring all that into fruition. So I'm not really seeing that from where I sit. I know that it's, a disruptor, but how it's handled and managed is not in my area of expertise. Over.
Makes sense. Thanks. Another follow-up question from previous notes here. How has your organization been able to break down organizational silos to create positive supply chain transformation in an efficient and timely manner? Wanda, do you have any comments there?
Yes. And when I saw this question, I said, you know what, I could answer this in a couple of ways, but I'm going to try to just simplify. So we're using two different types of approaches here. We're trying to hire to the skill sets that I mentioned earlier by hiring contractors to immediately help us fill the gap. And then we're also looking internally. We have some areas where we can move folks around to really help mitigate the risk and to make sure that we are embracing to get those efficiencies in the supply chain done. Over.
Thanks. And Cindy, do you have any recommendations for how agencies can create positive supply chain transformation?
I have a couple that are that we've seen successful in the past that I'd be happy to suggest. I know, as Wanda mentioned very early on, people, processes, and technology are three different elements, and it's a little bit like the three-legged stool, which we see this across the board in any kind of business transformation approach, that you need to consider all three. And they are of equal weight, although they have different impacts depending upon where you are in that transformation process. But I do think that one of the ways to help folks who have gotten very accustomed to working in a certain way and to think about things differently and help them evolve to a new way of working is also to demonstrate what some of the benefits are of what the transformation, whether it's simple automation or whether it's something much more complicated in terms of a whole new system, what that system can, how that system can best benefit them and make their contributions to the organization that much more significant through that. But one of the ways to do that is obviously to involve them in the development of that evolution. So I don't think I'm mentioning anything new here as an idea, but I often think that, when we talked earlier about getting all the stakeholders involved to be on the same page and understand how, what the situational awareness is on day one, the key element of those stakeholders are the users of the system. So there's customers, but there's also users and people that are involved in making sure that the system operates the way that it needs to, because they are part of the building of that system, not only in terms of what the system does, but actually the data that goes into that system and how that system is used to provide a level of information for decision making. So getting those people involved early to have them help develop and build that system is critical to making sure that it's built the way they would want to use it, and also that they would find value out of it. And so, low-code platforms such as what Pega System provides do a great job of helping those users actually get involved in the development of what a system will look like and what it will do early on. And you really need those people, because they are the building blocks, and also the key. I'll say the key. The people that know best how the system is working and also what doesn't work about that system. In the military, it's always amazing to me at how people tend to find ways to make something work that doesn't work quite right. They figure out the quick fix right away and move on because they're focused on achieving the mission. And what, that old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. I have met so many people in the course of my working with the Department of Defense over the last 20 years who are great problem solvers because they figure out how to make something work that didn't work the way it was supposed to, but they know what the end result is. So getting those people involved up front and actually giving them a template to say, here's your chance to build that system the way you want it to work, that best supports how you're trying to accomplish your goals and your mission, and actually get them part of the building process, because then they are part owners of the system and also part benefactors of the success. And I think that's kind of a key element that we often think about, but sometimes not until the end result's already produced. So I think that's kind of critical to really making a level of success, and also achieving the end result of something that will live on beyond just the system once it's first deployed, but through versioning, through improvements, and through an ultimate institutionalization of that process. I think that's really important. And I know we've seen plenty of successes, but also plenty of failures in terms of system rollouts in any organization. And the government is no different, but this is true in the private sector as well. Getting people involved helps you to improve the level of probability that those systems will be successful.
And if I could, those are very good points, particularly when you're talking about getting your people at the table early. Well, we discovered in our transformation strategy that you've got to engage your from the deck plate up, you've got to engage everyone that's going to have a role or responsibility to help you transform whatever it is you're trying to do. Because if the employees or the contractor, whomever you're working with, they have to be in from the beginning and not coming in the middle trying to do a reset. And you're absolutely correct. I'm prior military. I did quite a few years as a supply officer in the Navy, and you're right, mission first. And so we look for ways to solve a problem without understanding what caused the problem. And we have a tendency to do that rather than trying to embrace things up front. So in the transformation strategy here at LawCom, one of the things that we wanted to be crystal clear about is that, to determine the way forward, we had to understand that we were going to have to move some people around. We were going to have to embrace change. We were going to have to do change management, knowledge management. All of those things were key components to doing the transformation. And also you were going to have to build up some legacy items that were still kind of wanted to hang around, because people do get comfortable, and rather than trying to make the system do what it's designed to do, they feel more comfortable than saying, well, I did it this way for 20 years in the old system, let's just retransform that. So there are a lot of things that go into play when you're doing that immediate look at how the organization can really transform. Over.
It's really helpful. So looking kind of towards the future, what should agencies and agency leaders really prioritize 6 months from now to ensure supply chains are being optimized? Wanda, do you want to start with that one?
Ooh, now that's a loaded question. Wow. Being in right in the middle of this transformation, I'm still going to hang my hat on the people, process, technology piece. I think leaders are just going to have to look at those three components of and try to figure out how you're going to embrace those three, how you're going to develop a strategy or strategies that will help you get your stakeholders, how will it help you manage your suppliers and set up the supplies. There's just going to have to be a lot of planning factors up front, but understand the end state first. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And how do you want to integrate the supply chain? There's so many variables. Just recently had that discussion inside of the command here. When you talk about being an integrator for solutions, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get solutions to make sure the supply chain is not disrupted. And if it is, what's the risk? What going in, how you can handle certain things. So I just think you're just going to have to be forward thinkers, forward lookers, but you really have to look at the people, process, and technology to run your operation.
Great, thank you. Cindy, anything to follow up there?
Yeah, I would agree 100%, because as the supply chains advance, as the technology becomes more capable but also more complex, it still boils down to there's some core elements of what a supply chain is intended to do. And, you can't lose sight of that, and you have to focus on those core elements. I do think that there's some really interesting technology. Pega Systems is a company that leverages this, and there are others out there. But there's some really cool technology out there that can help advance the level of decision making, or I should say expedite the level of decision making as a key component of supply chain that we hope agencies will start to consider and start to really focus on. I know the department has had for a number of years now quite a bit of focus on artificial intelligence and AI and advanced decision making in terms of some of the key warfighting platforms that they have been focused on. We think that this kind of capability and technology is ripe to be inserted and leveraged in business systems across the department as well. And that's really where I think the rubber can meet the road, because with the increasing demands on the organization and the department, the increasing focus, and also the potential budget challenges that we will be facing in the future, I think the more we can leverage some of that key technology that enables faster decision making, better decision making, and more capable decision making that expands things further, I think that's where we should be looking in terms of inserting some of that technology now, while we still have a wide open canvas with which to work, and a real core focus and intention in terms of improving the business systems and capability and efficiency across the department. So, looking at AI capabilities, advanced automation and decisioning are really key areas that I think, we can get a lot of big bang for our buck throughout the department, even starting very, very small on one key element or one key piece of that journey, and advancing that even further, because it's sort of like once you get started with those capabilities, the ball seems to roll faster and faster and faster. And all of a sudden, you've got a system that's very far advanced compared to where you were even 6 months ago. So the potential is great. And I think that's a key area to focus on in the near term. And we're seeing some interest across the department. We hope we continue to see more.
Great, thank you. So we're just about to wrap up, but any final thoughts or recommendations, Wanda or Cindy, that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I think I've said most of it, but I'll hang my hat on what I tell my staff every day, and what I will say to anyone that wants to hear about how the transformation and how the supply chain is working for us. Be proactive. Understand your requirements, understand your end state, understanding that operating in the supply chain business is not it evolves. It's an evolving business. There's so many challenges and risks that we have to look at, but it's a dynamic place to be right now to help meet the end state for your supply chain operation, whether you be in DOD or in the private sector. The supply chain never sleeps. Is always looking for the next innovation. We're always looking for the next innovation. And if you're already thinking about it and you haven't done something, you're late to the party. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, Cindy, any final thoughts from you, or you feel?
No, I think Wanda summed it up really well. So I'm going to let it go with that.
Yeah. I think that was a great way to end. Wanda and Cindy, thank you both so much for this discussion. It was really great to have you join us and share your thoughts and just expertise in general. I'd also like to thank our audience for tuning in today to this program, Automating Supply Chain Management. If you missed part of today's program, or you'd like to share with any of your colleagues, the on-demand program will be available shortly, and we'll share it via email. From GovExec, I'm Anna Pettygen, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.